Hello, everyone. As you're coming into the room, we want to encourage you to sign up for our Slido engagement platform if you can. You just need to scan with your phone, or you can go to slido.com. You can get the QR code here, whatever is easiest. And we'll be using this as our primary engagement tool today. So you might hear this announcement a couple of times. We're just going to give folks a few minutes to come in before we get started.
All right, welcome everyone. My name is Kevin. I'm the training coordinator with the Association of State Floodplain Managers, and I'd like to welcome you to our event today. We're going to be talking about adaptive leadership in the age of AI. But before we get into it, I have a couple of regularly scheduled announcements I'd like to make. So first of all, I just want to let everybody know we've got a great topic today, and this event has been produced by ASFPM's AI subcommittee. So they do a ton of great work and they're presenting this event today. It is approved for CECs if you're a CFM. So if you stick with us for the entire event and you engage, you'll be given credit. And how that's going to work is I will automatically add that to your CEC file if you're a national level CFM, or if you're in an accredited state, I'll be providing everyone, regardless of location, with a certificate of attendance if you qualify. So you can take that back to your accredited state to get credit that way. Speaking of that certificate of attendance, that's going to take about a week to get back to you. I'm going to send that to you via email, and that email will include any promised follow-up from this event. So if we talk about links, or we'll share the Q&A archive from this event that way as well. So anything you might want from this event post-event, we'll be delivering that to you in about a week. A couple of things about engagement. As you can see on the screen here, we're using Slido to engage with you today. So get out your phone and scan that QR code. We're going to be using that today. Obviously, you can also do that at your desktop or in your browser if you want to go to slido.com and enter the event number, but please be ready to do that. And also, we are hoping to have a balance of time at the end to address any questions you might have. So if you do have questions, please find in the Zoom interface here, there's a Q&A feature. That's where we're going to be taking questions today. There's also a chat area that will not be monitored for questions related to the subject matter today. We're going to try to keep an eye on it, and if something comes up, we'll try to address it. But if you want to make sure you get your question in the queue, add it to the Q&A area, please. Without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenter for today, Skye King. Skye is a behavioral scientist and founder of Geo LifeWorks, where she helps leaders navigate uncertainty and responsibly adopt emerging technologies. Skye has completed MIT's executive program in AI and business strategy and serves on the aforementioned ASFPM AI subcommittee. So with 2 decades of experience across enterprise, government, and science-driven organizations, she focuses on adaptive leadership, AI governance, and decision-making under pressure. So Skye, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, great. Well, again, just a reminder for any of you that have joined us since, I see about 364 folks in the Slido, and we've got about 580 people. So just the rest of you, if you're able to grab this QR code, we're going to focus on a couple of different questions as we go along here. So this is giving us a good sense of the ecosystem that we're working with today. Looks like we've got checking out our results here. We've got a number of local and regional public agencies, along with consulting or engineering firms, and a number of others. So you will continue to see us using Slido throughout this. So just to begin, we're in a field where we are no stranger to change. Climate impacts, funding shifts, political complexity, evolving public expectations, job and career transitions. There's a lot going on. And we know that many of you are facing all of these pressures as well, in addition to AI. But what we have now is a new layer of adaptive demand that is interacting with all of those other challenges that we've historically faced. And what makes this moment different isn't just the technology, it's the pace, it's the uncertainty, the human reaction to both. And this is not about becoming AI experts today. This is about, delving a bit into becoming more adaptive leaders in this changing environment. So we'll be talking about a practical model to give us some structure for being more effective leaders, and we'll be sharing a few tools and taking some time to practice and reflect on these techniques. So, to explain what I mean by adaptive leadership, let me take you back to a moment that had nothing to do with AI. So, this is several years ago, probably about, 10, 15 years. And I was working with a large coastal city preparing for new flood maps. We thought the challenge was logistical: book the venue, draft the press release, get the right logos on it. Technically, everything was looking really solid. But when we walked into the coordination meeting that day, the room was really tense. Arms were crossed, super short responses, energy was off. And what we discovered was that several of the partner organizations did not want their names on the press release and didn't want to be part of the event. They were worried about backlash. They were worried about public trust. They were worried about being blamed for changes in flood zones. And I imagine some of this sounds familiar to some of you. So, what we thought was a communication task was actually a trust challenge. So, instead of debating how to wordsmith the press release, I asked a different question at this time, which was, what would this event have to be for you to feel good about putting your name on it and in participating? So, that question thankfully shifted the room, and the event evolved from providing the community a technical briefing on their flood risk to also including a broader community resource fair around resilience. And while those technical details mattered, the real work was adaptive and embracing experimentation and innovation as a part of this. So, as we are thinking about this, I'd love to just take a pulse. We've got our next question up here, which is about where you're feeling this tension and uncertainty in your own work. And I know a lot of these probably are things you're feeling. I'd love for you to focus on just the two most prominent areas that you're seeing and feeling. And again, for those of you who signed in a little bit later, this is the Slido resource we'll be using. You can go to slido.com and put in this code, or you can scan this QR link on your phone. I find sometimes with these, looking at things on your phone makes it a little bit easier. So yeah, go ahead and select up to two here. And as you're looking at the options, I'd love for you to notice that most of these aren't technical issues. They're about accountability or trust or alignment or standards or expectations or compliance. And let's see what's rising to the top. We've got, I think, about a little over close to half of you. I'd love to see a few more. And again, this is just identifying what are some of the biggest tensions or uncertainty that you're encountering in your day-to-day work. And it could be with your current organization, it could be with a past organization, or maybe even some of the tensions you're starting to see materialize in some of the communities or clients or others that you're working with as part of your work. So we'll just wait. A few more are coming in. I'd love to get over 400 if we can and allow folks to participate. All right, well, let's see what is rising to the top already. It looks like we are seeing a lot in the accountability and liability. We're seeing a lot of folks selecting that. We're also seeing a little bit of a bump in the internal alignment and adoption. We've got about 13% there, 12% in the regulatory compliance. So yeah, it looks like this is definitely something that we're thinking about. And I think this tells us something important about where we are today. So what I'd like to do next is have us delve a little bit into our own feelings about what we're going through. So, before we talk about the solutions, I just want to understand something else, not where that tension is in your organization, but how you're feeling about it. There is no right answer here. And a note about this is all anonymous. This is not connected to you specifically. So, feel free to keep it real here. There are no right answers. This is just honest data insight. Kind of how are you feeling about things For some of you, it might be difficult to select just one, just maybe pick the one that you're feeling most aligned to today. And what I'm starting to notice about this distribution is that we've got a number of folks that are curious but cautious. Okay. And then, we have folks also interested, and concerned about the risk, or maybe a few of you are energized and optimistic. Love that. That's kind of balanced with the number of you who are skeptical or just beginning to explore things. And I'm seeing a couple of threes and twos and fives in the chat as well. Yeah, so wherever you are on this spectrum, whether it's curious or skeptical, energized, overwhelmed, that's useful information because adaptive leadership starts with awareness. And here's why that matters right now. So, adaptive leadership as a concept has been around for a couple of decades. Research out of Harvard, research out of a number of other areas, organizational learning. Many of you have likely been practicing elements of this long before AI, whether you realized it or not. But something is different now, right? AI is advancing faster than many of our standards and policies and shared norms. And that creates a specific combination of speed, uncertainty, and accountability pressure. So when these three converge, predictable human patterns emerge for how we often respond in those situations. And that's what I would like for us to explore next. So under pressure and uncertainty, we don't become irrational, we become predictable. So, research across behavioral economics, public administration, aviation safety, emergency management, and a number of other industries shows that uncertainty brings about a number of patterns that we can see consistently. So, as I'm walking through these, you should hopefully have already seen the next Slido question appear. I'd invite you to select the bias that you think is most influencing some of the AI decisions in your current or your most recent organization, or maybe some of the biases you've even noticed in yourself. And I'll just quickly walk through those here. Again, this is all anonymous. So, action bias is where we feel the pressure to act quickly to regain a sense of control. Authority bias is where we might be deferring to perceived expertise, the loudest voice, the highest title. In automation bias, that could be where we're relying too much on system outputs. And blame avoidance is all about structuring decisions to reduce potential future criticism or liability. And then status quo bias is our tendency to prefer what's familiar, even when conditions are changing. So, just to reiterate here, these are not character flaws. These are not about sort of individuals. These are predictable human responses to complexity. And we see these across teams manifesting in different ways, across whole organizations. And what adaptive leadership allows us to do is to respond deliberately instead of automatically. And I'm just going to put this up again. Sometimes, if you need to sign back in, you should be able to scan this QR code and come back to the Slido, or you can go to slido.com to gain access there as well. So let's take a look at what we're seeing in the results. We've got, well over 300 votes coming in. It looks like that automation bias is the current front runner, so that over reliance on AI outputs and really, putting a lot of trust in these models, that might be a bias for us to consider. I think, what are we seeing for our second most popular? It looks like many of you organizations are not yet discussing AI. And what's great about adaptive leadership is it helps you as you're just starting to begin those conversations. And what I'm hoping you'll see is that these are tools and techniques and approaches that we can use even for non-AI related uncertainty and challenges and other situations that we face. So we've walked through a couple of those predictable patterns under pressure, and I'm just checking this again. Yeah, automation bias still in the running as the top contender. And then we've got status quo bias and a couple of others, being pretty strong. So now the real question becomes, when uncertainty increases, what does strong leadership actually look like? And this is something where I'm going to be having you share a couple of words, and what that really looks like. So, what signals strong leadership during uncertainty? We'll be getting into the ADAPT model and some of the tools we can use, but this is a great chance to kind of level set, what behaviors stand out when leaders are navigating uncertainty well, or when you see teams navigating uncertainty well, or are there maybe approaches you try to take during uncertainty to signal that sort of strong leadership? And what I'm seeing right now, we had a number of things. I see calm in the chat, also see that on the word cloud. We're seeing confidence. Seems like that's the largest one so far. We've got calm, decisive, understanding, adaptability, decisiveness, steady, flexibility. A lot of great words in here. And yes, please keep sharing. I know a lot of you are continuing to type, so I will keep this up. And what really stands out, and I think what is powerful about this is, how many words do you see on this word cloud that talk about technical brilliance? How many talk about the specific tech here? I am not seeing any yet. Sometimes we'll get a couple of those in there, but yeah, words like, resilience and transparency and all of these come up. So this is all about how leaders behave under pressure, and it looks like a lot of you, have seen, and you know it when you see it. So many of the leadership behaviors people typically share when I ask them this question, and based upon the research, falls into one of the following categories. And again, these themes aren't random. They're grounded in research across, yes, adaptive leadership, but also crisis management and systems thinking and organizational learning. So strong adaptive leaders consistently demonstrate clarity under pressure. That seemed very popular in the word cloud. It's that ability to frame what matters most when things feel chaotic. That systems awareness, where you can see the potential ripple effects of a decision before they happen and maybe course correct, or maybe have some shifts. Transparent communication, that was, loud and clear in the word cloud as well. That's about reducing ambiguity without overpromising, right? It's about striking that balance. And then stakeholder engagement, where we're understanding who is impacted and how we can move things forward. And last but not least, that idea of continuous learning. So where are we testing, learning, having that consistency, getting that understanding in place in order to adapt to what's needed in the time frame we need it in? So again, these are not personality traits. These are observable behaviors. And what's great about them all is these are skills that can be learned and cultivated. So then the question becomes, how do we operationalize this? And that is where ADAPT comes in. So GeoAdapt is a practical adaptive leadership model for navigating high uncertainty environments like AI. It's based upon adaptive leadership research, as well as organizational change research and a number of others, behavior science, helped to inform this. And the goal here was to try to come up with a simple and practical approach that we could apply in a large number of situations. So notice that this is not about optimizing an AI model. This is about leading humans through change. And as a process, we know these things are only as strong as the leaders who are using them, because under pressure, we don't rise to our ideals, we default to our habits. And those habits are shaped by the biases we just discussed earlier, as well as a lot of the leadership skills we did in the previous slides. So this model is meant to give us a disciplined sequence. We're assessing the challenge, deciding where to focus first, anticipating that human impact, practicing the trust building behaviors, and then testing, learning, and recalibrating as we go. And the idea here is to slow thinking down just enough that we can calibrate and reset even when the work we're doing, especially in times of uncertainty and change, has to move really quickly. So you'll also notice on the right-hand side, I included a couple of the specific adapt tools I thought would be most relevant for this audience today. We're going to walk through these in more detail, and they include uncertainty mapping, technical adaptive pause, and then this decision boundary statement. So we'll walk all through all of those in a moment. All right, so now what I want to do is make this practical for you. So we're going to run a quick micro lab, and it's the goal here is not to master that adapt framework, but to experience how it changes the conversation or how it tweaks your thinking around this or the decisions you might make. So what I want you to do is imagine that you're in this room and this is your team. It is peak storm season, and you are using an AI model that updates every few minutes with real-time flood predictions. What you're seeing is that sometimes those AI generated flood predictions contradict what your most experienced field staff is saying and knows or is seeing. So no one doubts in this room that the technology is powerful, but the real question is, how are you going to lead this team when the data is moving fast, but trust is maybe lagging a little bit behind? And there's some real, tangible, practical questions about what's going on. So this is where adaptive leadership begins. And the first step in adapt is assessing the challenge. And to do that, we first need to identify the uncertainties we're actually facing in this scenario. So why don't you just think a little bit, what are some of the uncertainties you might have in this scenario? And you can great. I love it. I'm already seeing some comments come in. Yeah. What uncertainties can you flag for this scenario already? What questions would your team have if this was you using an AI tool to help with real-time flood predictions during a storm? All right. I'm going to let you share some of those things in the chat. And so this is where we start to map those uncertainties. And this as a tool can be really helpful. This is done in person. This can be done virtually. This can even be done asynchronously, where you're working with teams. And the idea is that before jumping to solving, right, having that action bias take over, take hold, or that authority bias be driving things, how can we take a quick pause here to ask, what do we know at this point? What are we estimating? And what is still evolving? So the output here is that we're looking to reduce sort of that bias for premature certainty, like we know all the answers. And we're sort of asking, well, what are the things we don't know? Where do we have certainty? And where do we not have certainty? And the idea here is to create a shared clarity before moving on to potential solutions. So that is our first route. And I love the continuation of some of the questions you all would think about in the meantime. This is exactly what we want to be sparking here. So the second part of the assessment, after you've been diagnosing sort of what the uncertainties are, what some of the challenges are, what some of the questions are, is to think a bit about which of these fall into the bucket of being a technical challenge where we have known solutions that can be solved with expertise, data, processes, and things we already have, right? Those are the things we know how to solve and approach. And then which of the things you're thinking about might fall into the adaptive bucket. So this is where you might be requiring people change how they think or relate or decide. Maybe these challenges involve trust or values or identity or legitimacy. And adaptive challenges may even need completely new approaches or processes. And so I think often we see, AI related activities, and we might think that that is a technical challenge. And don't get me wrong, some of them definitely are technical challenges to solve. But often some of the resistance and some of the other challenges we see around AI adoption, deployment, how we think about it, whether we even launch it to begin with, those are adaptive types of challenges. So this is the point where we can highlight another adaptive leadership tool, which is our technical adaptive pause. The idea here is that before acting, we're going to pause and ask, is this a technical problem with known solutions? Or is this an adaptive challenge that involves trust, legitimacy, other sorts of issues, or maybe a process or approach that we can't yet solve, or we don't know what the answer is to this? And then the third question around here is all about what is the right type of response for this given challenge. So the goal here is what are those leadership responses that are required? And how do we make sure that we're not trying to use a technical solve for an adaptive challenge? I think probably some of you have experience where those maybe haven't worked as well as we hoped or what we needed. So what I'd love for us to do is to just practice this distinction. And here are a few challenges that surfaced during an uncertainty mapping when we were discussing using AI for flood forecasting. So hopefully, as some of these look familiar, it looks like a couple of them were questions that a few of you were already sharing in the map on this, which is great. So as we read through them, what I'd love for you to do is to just mentally ask yourself, based on what we just discussed, are these challenges technical or are they adaptive? And I'm going to ask you to share the numbers for the ones you think are adaptive in the chat. So, and I'll give you a hint already. 3 of these are adaptive and 3 of these are technical. So, is it questions about whether the AI model is calibrated for current storm conditions? Is the challenge, is this adaptive or technical? Erosion of trust between experienced staff and AI supported workflows. What about concern for being blamed if AI informed decisions go wrong, or concerns about delays affecting the timeliness of model outputs? What is lack of clarity about who holds the final decision authority when AI conflicts with human judgment? And then what about questions about reliability of the sensors that are feeding the model? So love to see so many things in the chat. Again, we're asking this question because the tools we use may differ between technical and adaptive challenges, and the things we consider and even the stakeholders we engage may differ. So, all right, let's see how you folks did. Here is how things are sorted. So hopefully, those of you, that were able to go through this noticed that in the technical challenges, that's where we were seeing, questions around calibration, delays, sensor reliability. And that was number 1, 4, and 6. Numbers 2, 3, and 5 were about trust erosion, blame concerns, decision authority, and those are all adaptive challenges. So how did you do? Oh, John, nice. 7, 10, 11, right? This was just a subset. I think the first time we brainstormed this, there were actually about 20, 25 challenges that were identified. So just for the sake of our cognitive load today, we picked we picked the top 6. All right. So most AI friction isn't about the AI model. It's actually about the adaptive related challenges, and it's about trust and authority. So now the second letter, so that was all the A, the assess, assessing the challenge. Now we're in the D part of the adapt framework, which is decide. And so we know we don't have time or bandwidth or funding to solve everything everywhere all at once. So where do you focus first when you've assessed the challenge to see which are adaptive? And you might have a different calculation that goes into where you're going to decide to focus first when you're looking across your various adaptive challenges. In this case, if it were me in the room, I would recommend the third option, which was around the lack of clarity for who holds final decision authority when AI conflicts with human judgment. We know that if decision authority is unclear, trust erodes. And when trust erodes, that makes even strong technical systems struggle. So after we decide which adaptive challenge to focus on, we're now going to move to the next stage, which is to pause and think about your stakeholders and the human impact that your adaptive challenge might be causing. So this is where we get into the next letter of our adapt model, which is anticipate. And anticipate is about asking, if this challenge continues, who's most likely to feel its impact? And it's typically easiest to map this based on actual conversations with people. I would encourage you, to continue to develop those stakeholder relationships. Maybe you're calling up some folks on the phone or having a discussion about this. Maybe some of your insights are also based on past experiences you have with these different folks about the challenges and other related concerns they might have. In this case, we're talking about ambiguity around what to do when the AI flood prediction model differs from our human insights and recommendations, which are based on years, if not decades, of experience. So for this scenario, we picked kind of three stakeholders, and just follow along here because we're going to be having you do a similar exercise for yourself in a few moments. So in this scenario, senior leaders, may face public accountability. Under pressure, maybe they're going to push for certainty in areas where you don't feel you can be certain. And often underneath that, there may be a fear of criticism. And just when we're thinking about stakeholder engagement, it's helpful to think about, well, what are the pressures this particular person or group or team is under? What are some of the behaviors or actions we might see or anticipate with them? And then what are maybe some of the emotions we might anticipate as well? So if we go to veteran staff, that's the next one in the middle. That might be, we've got team members and others whose identities are deeply rooted in the experience. And in this case, it might be in those flood prediction models and knowing where things were going to go. And when AI contradicts them, that can be really challenging. It might feel like an erosion of their expertise or even displacement. And then operational leads, just as another potential stakeholder, they're making the real-time critical decisions. If authority is unclear in those instances, maybe they freeze, maybe they default to the status quo and what the safest, options are, and maybe there are emotions around that where they know they're in the operational lead position. They need to be, certain, and they don't want to be second guessed. So notice that none of this is about the AI tool necessarily. This is about pressure, identity, and accountability. So once we see what some of those human impacts are more clearly, the question then becomes, in this sort of situation, what would trust look like? And that is, trust in terms of both behavior and actions. So this is where, again, I want you to put on your own thinking cap. If you were going to pick one of those stakeholders we just talked about, or one trust behavior, one tool, let's get those gears flowing. This is where, the P in ADAPT is all about practicing visible trust building behaviors. You might do things in your organization like needing to clarify decision boundaries, or maybe you just have a blanket statement around inviting structured skepticism and you say, hey, that's part of this dynamic. We want you to ask questions. You might be running transparent walkthroughs or practicing other trust building behaviors. So the point I want to make here is that trust building isn't about convincing people that the AI is better or it's what they should default to. Trust building is built by making authority visible. And in this case, it might be questions around, when does human expertise lead? When does AI inform those decisions? How do we handle disagreement? And in this example, you can see here, veteran staff, in most operational environments, at least in my experience, veteran staff hold huge formal and informal influence. People are looking to them for those cues under uncertainty. They're often leading, those initiatives. And if trust erodes there, that is going to spread very, very quickly. So we can identify one trust building behavior. In this case, again, we're going to clarify decision authority. And one support tool we can use to do that I'm going to share next is this decision boundary statement. So one of the fastest ways AI creates organizational stress and chaos is when we're blurring accountability. We hear this in the field. I think I've heard this from a number of you on the call as well. How do we determine when we decide, or was it the AI model that decided? And a decision boundary statement helps to make that explicit and answers three questions. So when does AI inform decisions? When can humans override it? And who is accountable? So for example, if field reports and expertise and what we're seeing live is showing that the flooding conditions that we're seeing IRL are contradicting the AI model's predictions, it might make sense for us during an active storm for the human review to override the AI, and we might bake that into the system and how we approach things. And this is not about being anti-AI by any means. This is just clarifying how AI and humans are going to share authority. So for those of you, and again, this will be in the references and resources that we'll be sharing after this event. But for those of you who follow the National AI Risk Guidance, this process of clearly defining the roles that humans play along using AI tools hopefully sounds familiar. So it's probably something that you've seen before. So this is to help make that practical. So when you're documenting and communicating these boundaries in advance, you reduce fear of blame, build trust under pressure, and clarity at this practice stage is huge for building trust. But trust itself is not enough. Trust is sustained through iteration. So the last one in our model here is the T in adapt. And this is about testing and experimentation, but it's not for that for its own sake. It's about protecting alignment in changing conditions. So testing is about how adaptive systems stay adaptive. And you can see there's kind of three big steps here. Test, is where we're making decisions explicit. We're treating them hopefully as hypotheses. They're not necessarily permanent truths. And we can document here where AI is influencing our judgment and where humans are overriding it. When we learn things, when we reflect and analyze, we might do hot washes or we might have follow-up meetings and get some information and insight on where ambiguity showed up, where authority felt unclear, where did trust wobble, and being really transparent about what we're learning and where we need to then recalibrate, adjust, realign, and move forward. So without testing and structured reflection, even small shifts can start to compound over time. And I think we've, seen that. I think of even some of the visuals for flooding, right? A small little stream of water can slowly, start, but then very quickly turn into a large torrent. So when we are not continuing to test, learn, and recalibrate, we can sometimes fall into those areas where we're not staying aligned in changing conditions. So now what we're going to do is we are going to try out the full adapt model yourself. And so what I'd love for you to think about, and again, this is a short micro activity we're trying to do to just reinforce a few things here. So option A, listen closely. Option A is maybe you already have an adaptive challenge you're facing at your organization or some issue or thing you've noticed. So option A is to use a real AI adaptive challenge from your own organization. So if you have a couple of ideas for that, would love for you to write those down. You can also share them in the chat if you'd like, but write those down. Now for option B, I know there are a number of you that your organizations may not have reached this, stage yet, or maybe you're just starting to explore it. So what I'd like to do here is to propose a alternative scenario. And, those who have real AI challenges, you can pick option A or option B. So I want you to imagine that you're in this room here. We are having a flood mitigation AI scenario where AI tools are being used to rank projects for flood mitigation funding. So we are using data from cost benefit analysis, predicted damage reduction, population data, a lot of other data sources to help us inform an AI tool that is going to help rank projects for flood mitigation funding. All right, so I want that in your mind. And here, the idea is that we want to identify what that adaptive challenge is. So if you're in option B for your scenario, we already did the uncertainty mapping for you. So let's imagine we did the uncertainty mapping and we came up with these 4 challenges. And your first goal here is to identify which challenges of these are technical and which are adaptive. And I was nice to you, I promise. 2 of these are adaptive and 2 of these are technical. So I want you to look at the ones you think are adaptive and maybe jot those down. We'll have someone also share these in the chat so you can reference them as we walk through what how we can apply this adapt model to these questions. All right, I'm seeing a lot of great movement in the chat. We have folks already identifying what the adaptive concerns are. All right. So you've already done steps 1 and 2. And what I'm going to do here is to give you a few minutes, probably about 5 minutes or so. And I'd love for you to sketch out what one stakeholder is that you think would be impacted by this adaptive challenge that you have. Then the idea from there is to identify one trust building behavior or one way that you could, both appear and be trustworthy as well as engender some trust actions from that individual. And then testing is going to be identifying one small action you could take to learn from this scenario. So um, I'm going to give you a few moments here. I will go on mute. I think we're going to do just about, 4 or 5 minutes or so. And if you're willing, I have a couple of prompts in there to share some of your takeaways in the chat, and we'll go from there. So again, we will be sharing. Thank you, Fetmano. Fetmano just shared the list for option B, and your goal is to pick one of the challenges you feel is adaptive and to think through this. Who is one stakeholder you'd ID? What is one trust building behavior you'd explore? What is one small action you could take? All right, we will be back at 46 after the hour. All right, you have about 30 seconds left. Finish up your thoughts. And again, thank you for all of you who are sharing your insights and approaches and some of the stakeholders and trust building behaviors you're thinking about. All right, well, let's move on. You can continue to share. Love seeing all of the great insights and a lot of creativity as well. So this is wonderful. Um, if anybody would like to come off mute, we could share one or two of these if folks are willing to share sort of what this process was like for them. Um, would anyone like to share?
Hey,
Okay.
Sky, this is Kevin. So if you do want to come off mute, just use the raise hand feature and I'll unmute your line.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And again, we're getting a lot of great input into the chat for this as well. So
Yeah.
definitely appreciate that.
All right, Peter's raised his hand.
Okay, Peter, yes.
Peter, if you unmute yourself, you should be able to share.
Okay, well, my personal feeling about AI is it's not going to be a big concern to people who actually use their brain. It's going to be a big concern to people who do routine tasks day after day after day. And so I think we have to separate who's doing the real thinking and actually overseeing the results versus somebody just inputting something into a computer model. And I think that's the big challenge is how do we keep those people who are just doing routine tasks engaged in the process and actually being able to develop more skills than just inputting information or gathering information.
Absolutely. So it sounds like you identified two different stakeholders. You had the ones that are maybe being impacted more by these shifts than others, and the trust building behavior is sort of, it sounded like you were saying understanding what they're going through and where they could maybe shift in terms of roles. Do I have that right?
Yes, I think that's right. I think
Okay.
that's right. I think we have to redefine some of the work that's
Hmm.
being done with the advent of AI. AI is here. It's not going anywhere. It's
Yeah.
going to be even worse
Well, that is
or
certainly,
better.
you've definitely identified an adaptive challenge that would require that sort of stakeholder engagement and sort of walking through this and, figuring out what are some of those small actions that you could take to move things forward. I think we have time for one more, if there's one more hand raised, or if not, I can't see the hands right now, Kevin. So,
Peter was the
okay.
lone brave soul. So
We're good.
yeah,
We're good. All
yeah,
right.
yeah. Thank you.
So some of you have probably already seen that we have put up the next poll question. So the question here is around which step in ADAPT felt most challenging, or which do you think might be most challenging moving forward? So I just wanted you to take a moment to sort of pause and reflect on that. Is it about assessing the challenge and identifying what those uncertainties are? Is it deciding where to focus first? For some teams, it might be, how do we anticipate that human impact, or where are we going to be practicing and able to move forward with those trust building behaviors? And then, for other teams, it might be about testing, learning, and recalibrating. So I'm curious to see. We'll get a few more votes in. I see a number of you signing in now. And the question you see on the right is going to be the next question we ask. So you'll have a little bit more time for that. So I'm seeing some folks in the chat sharing, testing, right? Deciding where to focus first. And I'll tell you, each one of these topics could have a whole workshop or a half day or a full day just on its own. So this really is just a highlight and giving you the sort of Cliff Notes version or the Twitter version or whatever you want to say of what this is. So I'm seeing anticipating the human impact and practicing trust building behaviors. Oh, and deciding. We're kind of in a three-part horse race here with those, the D, A, and P, the deciding, anticipating, and practicing, that those are sort of where people are feeling they might have the greatest challenges. All right. Well, I think we've got sort of a quorum of votes. I'm going to move us to the next one, which is about what is one trust building action or tool you want to try in the next 30 days? Is there any, and this is just free form text. So were there any ideas sparked? Are there tools or steps or insights that came up today that you're thinking that you want to explore a little bit more? Maybe there are specific AI tools you want to explore. Maybe there are other gears that started turning and getting you thinking about what to do next. So I'm seeing, oh, okay, listening, assessing, learning. I saw a couple of folks putting in specific tools. Okay, that makes sense. Exploring. And this is not a word cloud, so you should also be able to enter in more if you have other ideas of things you'd like to try. Just a reminder, we also had the uncertainty mapping as a tool. We had the technical adaptive pause as a tool. And then we had the decision boundary statement as another tool that we brought up today as just examples of some next steps that you might be able to take. All right. I saw banana in there too. Yeah, love that. All right. So now, the idea here is it isn't about abstraction. These are all visible behaviors, and this is how we make adaptive leadership real. It's not through models and frameworks alone, it's through the small, consistent actions that we take. So I'd love for you to share in the chat what is one thing you're going to do in the next week. And if you zoomed out, what we're practicing, and we got a little bit of insight in today, is how we operationalize trust in AI-enabled systems. This is not about, being hard and convincing people. It's not about forcing adoption. It is about how we build clarity and recalibration into the system and move forward from there. So if this conversation resonates, if you're navigating AI-driven change, you want structured support, would love to connect with you. We've got upcoming adaptive leadership labs, other things like that. You can scan that code to stay in touch with me. And what I'd love to do, Kevin, is if we have a few questions that have arisen, would love to get to a few of those. I know we're not going to have time to do all of them today, but we can maybe get to one or two. And what we'll plan to do is follow up after this with some other responses to some of the questions that may have come up. All
Yeah,
right.
thank you. So we actually have a pretty clear Q&A queue right now. If you
Okay.
have put your questions in the chat, I may have missed them, so you can go ahead and drop them in the Q&A. And if we do have time, we'll come back to them. If not, as Sky, you mentioned, we'll get those answers to you in writing as soon as we can. But I know Yanan had a piece as well, so we can move to that if you like.
Yeah. Um, oh, you're saying move on to, okay. So there are some questions that came through pretty clear. Is there one burning one, or are we good on things?
No, there are no, okay, here, one just
Okay.
came in from
Okay.
Michael. Where is the federal government, Michael, where is the federal government stand on AI? I guess that's a pretty complicated
Yeah. We
answer,
could
but
do a
if you have
whole
some insight, that'd be great.
We could do a whole session just on that. I know that there have been different executive summaries and things that have come out over the years and months and things like that. In the resources and references, will include links to some of the, I mentioned some of the NIST work and other things that are coming out. Um, there are also some state specific guidance that has come out. So I'll plan to put some of those links in the resources and whatnot for you. What I would say is that it continues to change and evolve. And it's something that we definitely, as part of the AI subcommittee for ASFPM, are trying to think about and bring in other expertise to help us stay on top of that, uh, because it is complex. And I don't know, I feel like we could have a different conversation almost every week. And I feel I'm in Silicon Valley, so, there are new tools and new issues and challenges and transparency and safety and other discussions that are happening daily here. So yeah, it's a tsunami of information, and
Hmm.
there are some clear places to go for guidance. But
Yeah.
We will answer some more. What we'd love to move into next, and I'm going to pass things off to Yanan next, but these are just some of our upcoming AI subcommittee activities. There are a number of us on the AI subcommittee that are holding meetups during Climate Week, so you can get some details there. We have a workshop coming up, Yanan will get into. Would love for you all to join us on Flood Zone. We have a ASFPM AI collaborative there. And then Fetmano and I are going to be doing a session at ASFPM on practical AI for readiness and governance on Monday. So if you're going to the ASFPM, we hope you'll join us there. And with that, Yanan, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Guy and Yanan, before I pass to Yanan, can I
yeah,
sure, please.
for one thing for our audience here? I know that a lot of people kind of couldn't access to Slido and also enter a lot of input on the chats, and I wonder if we can combine those data and be able to show the result and share with the audience after this.
Definitely. Yeah, I think we had, it looked like typically we were over 300 or 400 for most of the Slido questions. So I know some of you were doing it in the chat, and we'll see what we can do.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, guys. So I guess my name's Yadama, and I'm gonna do a very quick reintroduction of our subcommittee because we did make some major updates in the past 2 years. So the current slide we're seeing on the screen is our current leadership team. So my name's Yana, and we have Padmano helping me to co-chair and co-founding this group here, and Sky King, who just did this great presentation, and she's actually our culture lead, trying to build up the culture in this community. And we have Ricky as our academia outreach lead. So you're probably going to see Ricky in the next webinar, where most of the academia and research institutes outreach work is under his umbrella. And then we got Tyson James, who is helping us with the commerce piece. So basically, a lot of the webinar are gonna coming up under Tyson's pillar. So basically, that's gonna be commercial ready used AI tool on the market. So this slide is showing the most recent ASFPM launched a flood zone platform. So basically, we have a team built up there. It's called the ASFPM AI Collaborative. So if you are a existing ASFPM member, you should have your portal login. So please use that login to this portal. Can we click one more time? Yes. So Padmano already posed a very important question about AI policy and governance. So feel free to join in those discussions on the portal, and we can definitely monitor. And this is going to be our one central location for the post-events activities and discussions. And next slide. All right, so a little bit of history. So 2024, we established this team, and last year, we established our framework with those leadership identified in the team. And this year, we are launching this online community because become our major platform to keep everyone engaged. So we do have a QR code. So if you want to scan that, but if you miss that, that's totally fine. Again, if you go to the Flood Zone link from ASPM, it should direct you directly to that place. So it's a public group, so everyone is free to join and discuss this topic. All right, do we have another one? Is this the last slide? Oh, last slide, yes. Upcoming webinar. So April 28th, we're gonna invite Dr. Xiaofeng Liu to come to do a presentation. So her research is using the foundation model and building up the trust through the foundation model application towards water management. So for those are not quite familiar, foundation models is basically the behind scene foundation model for every single applications. You probably very familiar with the ChatGPT or Copilot or Cloud Chatbot. They all have a foundation model connect to that. So we do have those frontier research towards water management. So let's, if you, we're gonna send out this invitation through ASFPM communication. So please watching out for that meeting invitation. All right, so that's everything. And thanks for everyone joining today. If you have any follow-up question, just join the Flood Zone and chat with us. Thanks.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Yanan. And that's our time for today. So Sky, thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule to share that with us and to our attendees as well. We really appreciate you being with us. Couple last reminders. We've got certificates of attendance and other resources that we're going to be distributing to you via email. Look out for that email probably the end of next week or maybe slightly before, but it's going to take about a week to turn that around. So thank you all so much again, and have a great rest of your week, everybody. Take care.